For the next 6 Sundays, we are going to discuss tackling the giants. I realize it's baseball season and everything, but I figured if I showed a picture of the San Francisco Giants with someone tackling them, that wouldn't be very nice. I also have nothing against the Giants. It's just, it's the Giants. And I'm using a picture of the 49ers tackling the Giants because that's my wife's favorite team and I'm trying to make points. It's a continuing process, believe me. Well, this is a fabulous story in Numbers about the difficulty of a faith group moving together. If you remember, the Hebrew children escaped Egypt. They were slaves. And for 40 years after their escape, they wandered in the desert. Now, it's not a very big desert. They didn't have GPS at that time. And so they wandered for 40 years. But the theologians say that the reason they wandered for 40 years was so that all of those who had known slavery would have completed their life on earth. And all of those who would be going into the promised land would have never experienced slavery. I think it's interesting that God says to pick a leader from each tribe, each one a tried and true leader. Well, you see, we are not unlike the Hebrew children. We are facing giants as we are on the edge of the promised land. I don't know if you feel it, but I feel it. There's something about to happen around here, something exciting. And anytime we come into the edge of the promised land, we always have difficulty. It's always a good idea when you get to the edge of the promised land to send out spies. And that's what they did. Each one a proven leader in their tribe. And as we approach the edge of our promised land, I think it's important that we look at these Hebrew children to see how they experienced this moving into the promised land and how they dealt with the giants that they faced. You see, because I think we need to have faith in the face of giants. But anytime we're on the edge of the promised land, we always run into a very famous group of people. I like to call them the doubt pushers. Of the 12 that went into the promised land to spy, 10 of them came back as doubt pushers. And there's 10 things we can learn about doubt pushers from this passage. The first thing is they do not suffer from lack of experience. They do not suffer from lack of experience. We went into the land into which you sent us. We've been there. We know all about it. Heck, we did a study on that. We had a focus group and a task force. We wrote a report. It's hanging on the church office wall. We know all about that. They do not suffer from lack of experience. And then they turn the direction from positive to negative. Those doubt pushers turn the direction from positive to negative. It says, we went into the land and it was flowing with milk and honey, but the only thing is, there's that word but again. They went from focusing on the milk and honey to turning the direction some complete other way. Third, they do not suffer from lack of evidence. The people who live there are fierce. Their cities are huge and well fortified. Holy smokes, we can't do that. We're just one church. And we're all old anyway. And we don't have any money. And we need new carpet. They can think of 100 different excuses as to why. They have all the evidence as to why it won't work. And they're happy to share it with you. Fourth, they make the story worse than it actually is. Look at what happens. It says, worse yet, we saw the descendants of the giant Anak. There weren't just fierce people, there were giants there. And even worse, it says, we even saw the Nephilim giants. Now, for those of you who don't know who the Nephilim are, that's okay. They only appear a couple of times in the Bible. And they are, you've heard of seraphim and cherubim, the angels, where the Nephilim were kind of like their cousin. They were these mythological, legendary creatures who were half angel and half human. They were giants. They're kind of like Bigfoot. It wasn't bad enough that the people in this land were fierce. We had to say there's giants there. Oh, yeah, and there's some supernatural, really scary giants there, too. The doubt pushers always make the story worse than it actually is. Fifth, they overestimate the opposition and underestimate their potential. They overestimate the opposition and underestimate their potential. It's a land that swallows people whole. Why, we can't ever do that. We've never done that before. We can't do that. We're not big enough. We're not strong enough. Sixth, they reject the faith and encouragement of others. Caleb says, we need to go there and attack them now. They say, no, we can't attack them. They're way stronger than we are. Doesn't matter that that's what God is calling you to do. You just can't do that. 7, they steal the peace and confidence of others. There's a very interesting narrative statement right in the middle of this passage. It says, they spread scary rumors among the people. Anytime you come up on the edge of the promised land, whether you're doing it as an individual or as a group or even as a church, there are always those out there who want to spread scary rumors. Did you see what that pastor wants to do? He's trying to destroy us. And he's an idiot anyway. Wait a minute, you're not laughing. These rumors pop up everywhere because they want to destroy the confidence. 8th, they have a poor self-image. Alongside them, we felt like grasshoppers, and they looked down on us like we were grasshoppers. We can't do that. We're just not that kind of people. Number 9, they stop the progress of God's people. Let's pick a new leader. Let's go back to Egypt. That'll be fun. We'll just go back the way we were. We don't need to move forward. And finally, they cause others to fail in reaching their potential. Their doubt is so overwhelming that it paralyzes the entire group. The people of Israel spent all night wailing. They weren't just crying or upset, they were wailing. These doubt pushers are everywhere. They're in our lives, they're in our church, and they're even in our mind at times. Well, how do we overcome the doubt pushers? We overcome it by faith. The problem is that there are two different aspects to faith. And I don't know that you've been told about the second one. So I want to talk to you about the difference between a primary faith and what I like to call a powerful faith. The first is experienced by most. The second is experienced by few. Primary faith is our foundation. It's what we look back on. We look back on all the things that God has done for His people, and we know that God is with us. We can have faith in Him because we've seen what has happened before. But powerful faith looks to the future. It looks forward. It's a visionary faith. It's the kind of faith that finds what God can do for us. Not what God has done for us, but what God can do for us. Our primary faith is that faith that saves us. It's grace. It's that passage where Paul says it's faith through grace that gives us salvation. But powerful faith is faith that sustains us. It helps us through the problems in our everyday life. It keeps us going forward when we don't think we have the energy to do so. Primary faith is that foundation on which we stand. On Christ the solid rock I stand. But powerful faith is the faith that we live by. Primary faith is about assurance. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. But powerful faith is about audacity. It's having the audacity to think about what God might be able to do for us. You see, primary faith is about identity. It tells us who we are. Our primary faith tells us who we are. But our powerful faith is about opportunity. It tells us what we can become. Not what we are, but what we can become. You see, I think that most folks experience some level of primary faith. We all understand that God loves us. We all understand that our sins are forgiven. We all understand that God cares for us, and that's a firm foundation on which we can stand. But I don't know that many experience a powerful faith, a faith that's visionary, that moves them forward, that gets them out of the bed in the morning and moves them towards something that no one would have ever imagined. Well, I want to move us from primary faith to a powerful faith. Now, I apologize about the fill-in-the-blanks outline this morning. I was a little ADHD this week, so there's lots of blanks in there. And you're going to have to pay close attention because it jumps around a little bit, and if you don't pay attention, if you take a little nap here or there, you're going to miss a couple of them and you're going to be mad at me. So I apologize at the outset, but I want to talk about moving from a primary faith to a powerful faith. You might subtitle this, How to Feed Your Faith, Starve Your Doubts, and Experience God's Best. Well, if we're going to talk about a powerful faith, I think we first need to understand that your faith determines your future. Your faith determines your future. If you have only a primary faith, not unlike that faith you had in primary school, you will be assured. You will have a sure foundation. You will be able to stand in your faith. But if you want a future that's moving forward, that God gets the best out of you, you have to have a powerful faith because your faith determines your future. If we want to move from a primary faith to a powerful faith, the first thing we need to do is we need to focus on God. That's the F in faith. We need to focus on God. The only difference between Joshua and Caleb and the 10 doubt pushers is that Joshua and Caleb were focused on God. The 10 doubt pushers were focused on the giants. If we spend all of our life focusing on the obstacles that we face, we're never going to get anywhere. We need to focus on God. That is the first key in this process. You see, because many of us focus on our obstacles, on the giants, and we are afraid. Well, the second step in moving from primary faith to powerful faith is to ask God to remove your fears. To ask God to remove your fears. There are several places in the Bible where God says, if you want something, just ask. We forget about that. Joshua says, their protection is God, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. We don't have to be afraid of anything because God is with us. You see, fear does a lot of damage. I think there are 4 different ways that fear damages our faith. First, fear paralyzes potential. Fear paralyzes potential. Last Sunday we talked about Jesus' resurrection, and if you remember what happened was that Jesus was hung on a cross and killed and died, and what happened to the disciples? They ran away and hid. In John it says they were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish authorities. They weren't afraid of God, they were afraid of the cops. They were locked in the room with their knees all shaking, and the only ones brave enough to go out were the women. You go, girls. And what happened? The women went to the tomb and they experienced the risen Christ. Fear paralyzes potential. If we're so afraid that we're locking ourselves in the room all the time, we're never going to experience what God has for us. Fear paralyzes potential. And second, fear ruins relationships. Adam says, I was afraid and I hid from you, God. Fear not only ruins our relationship with God, it ruins our relationships with those we love. If we're afraid to say what we need or what we want or what's going on, the relationship will die. We spent 5 weeks talking about that. Fear ruins relationships. It paralyzes potential, and fear hinders happiness. The Proverbs say worry can rob you of happiness. And David in the Psalm says, I'm worn out by my worries. Man, worry can just wear you out. It will suck your happiness right out of you. And finally, fear sabotages success. Job said, everything I fear and dread comes true. But the psalmist said, I prayed to the Lord, and he answered me, feeding me and removing me from all my fears. If we're afraid all the time, we will never have success because we'll try and destroy it before it even happens. We sabotage our success all the time. Now, probably the most important thing that you can do in moving from an primary faith to a powerful faith is to identify with others who have a strong faith. Identify with the faithful. Hang out with people who have a strong faith. Find some folks that you know who have that powerful faith and hang with them. Get to know them. Experience. Ask them questions. Hey, you've been through this difficult time. How did you get through it? It's important that we not try and live out on our own. We need to find people who are successful in their faith and befriend them and get to know them and learn from them. Well, after focusing on God and asking Him to remove our fears and identifying with the faithful, then to move from primary faith to powerful faith, we have to tackle the giants. We have to tackle the giants. We're going to spend the next few weeks talking about different giants we face in our lives, but I want to give you a little bit of information about what giants are. A giant is anything that stands between you and God's best for you. It's anything that stands between you and God's best for you. It's that obstacle that's in the way of you experiencing the powerful faith. A giant is also anything that seems bigger than you and your desire to serve God. The people of Israel said, look, let's pick a new leader. Let's head back to Egypt. It was so much nicer there. Sure, we had to be slaves, but we got to eat every day and no one was going to kill us. Let's let the government take care of it. A giant is anything that seems bigger than you and your desire for God. Next, a giant is that which is stronger than us and cannot be faced alone. A giant is anything that's stronger than us and cannot be faced alone. We all have this American cowboy image of ourselves, out on the lone prairie, driving them doggies. But it doesn't work that way with our faith. We need to be with others who are faithful. We need them around us because we can't do this on our own. Those giants, those obstacles that we face, they'll beat us if we do it on our own. We need to have friends who are faithful. Giants don't go away. They have to be faced and defeated. Joshua said, don't just rebel against God and don't be afraid. Why? We'll have them for lunch. When God is on our side, we can defeat the giants that we face. But they don't just go away. Oh, we can sidestep them and we can avoid them, but eventually they'll sneak back around and get us. And after 40 years, the giants were still there. But Israel had a different attitude. Joshua said, "They have no protection, and God is on our side. Don't be afraid of them." You see, the difference between primary faith and powerful faith is all about attitude. You have to be bold. You have to understand that God is with you. You don't need to be afraid anymore. All right, so let's do a little review on this moving from primary to powerful faith. First, we got to focus on God. We got to make sure that we're not spending all our time focusing on the obstacles that we face, on the giants that are in our way. We need to focus on God, because when our focus is on God, we can begin to move forward. Second, we need to ask God to remove our fears, because He will. All of us are afraid. It's not unnormal to be afraid. But if we ask, He'll remove our fears. And third, we need to identify with others who have a strong faith. We need to not try and cowboy this all by ourselves. We have to find folks in our neighborhood or in our church who have a strong faith that we can learn from. And then we need to tackle those giants. We need to face them head on. But there's one last part to moving from a primary faith to a powerful faith. We need to hold on to hope. We need to hold on to hope. In the Bible, it says that a day to God is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. To us, it seems like that 1,000-year thing happens more often. But we need to remember that God is with us. We need to hold on to hope. Ladies and gentlemen, our church has been through some difficult times recently. We've had some scandals. We've had some troubles. We've had some financial difficulties. We've lost some members, either through attrition or for those who have gone on to their great reward. But we need to hold on to hope. We need to understand that we are right on the edge of the promised land, and that God is ready to move us forward. But it ain't going to happen if we just have primary faith, like we had in primary school. We need to have a powerful faith, a faith that trusts in God, a faith that looks forward audaciously to see what God might do for us. Because when we hold on to hope, moving from a primary faith to a powerful faith, amazing things will happen, and the giants